So I'm gonna talk about how the collapse in the wave function applies in 3D, just like it does. Well, electrons are 3D too, but in the macro as it does in the micro. Okay, so I'm not gonna try to explain the wave function stuff, but you can look that up on YouTube and watch it. But just like the wave function can be collapsed in the micro, it happens out here in the macro. Now, it's harder to see because there's so many variables going on, but when you reduce your life or situation down to the bare minimum, you can start to see it. So you go about your life. I don't know how much. I gotta upgrade my phone. I don't know how much what's going on with my memory, but something's going on. I used to be able to record a long video. So you're going about your life, whether you go choose a career, go to a school, go to a college, get married, have kids, divorce, marriage, remarriage, change careers, cities, states, countries, whatever you're doing, whatever choice you make, you're collapsing the wave function to that possibility. So there's all possibilities right in front of you right now. There's all possibilities happening right now. Now, I've collapsed the wave function. I'm going to go buy me some dark chocolate because it's got antioxidants. So that's where I'm headed. I don't have to go there. But I've already collapsed the wave function in my mind. And so that's my destiny. So when two people get married, they collapse the wave function and they become tied together like glue, right? Now, so that creates, it takes that all possibilities and reduces it down to a smaller fractal. Now, all possibilities are happening inside that, but most of the time, because of the way people are, they have their little idiosyncrasies and they have their little, whatever you want to call it, ways about being, and they affect each. There's a push and pull there that they're just. It's kind of like a lot of times it goes back to childhood, childish mindset. If one's trying to grow or go in this direction, the other one pull. It's like two oxen tied together. But if one is bullheaded, eventually something's going to break. So let's say they can't seem to find that happy medium or whatever, then they end up divorced. So what happens at the divorce? The wave function that was collapsed, there's some results, there's some offspring of it. Whether there's kids or not, it doesn't matter. It's still an offspring. So they collapsed the wave function. They didn't like the wave function, one or the other one, or they couldn't work it out. In other words, they didn't like what the wave function produced, the point. It collapsed the wave into a point. So they didn't like their position in life, that point. The wave function is all possibilities. When you make a decision, a choice to yoke up with something down here, you collapse the wave function to a specific point, a place, a standing, a family, or a culture, or whatever. And so let's say they get a divorce. What happens with the wave function? Well, there's still results tied back to the previous choice. So they get a divorce and you think, well, all possibilities are still out there. Well, that's true in a way, but in another way, it's not true because you've already collapsed it with that big choice. Depends on the choice, Like I just passed Walmart because I wanted to see what was going on up here. Give me some free wood. If I feel like it, I might not do it. So, think about what I'm telling you. So they collapsed the wave function. They were going to build a life together. They end up saying, "Oh, it's not for me. Let's get a divorce." Or the other one. Sometimes it's out of the control of the person. But there might be offspring. But even if they're not kid offspring, there's still an offspring to that decision, and it affects you. That's why a lot of people, they can't move on They can't. I've seen it. I've watched it. They end up becoming alcoholics or drug heads, or they live in the past. They can't move on because something has stopped them from reaching into that wave function. Now it's a reduced wave function because there's consequences, but there's still a wave function out there. They can still reach into that wave function and collapse a new vision, a new idea. Without a vision, the people perish. Yeah, there's consequences. Now, what you can do with that new vision and that new wave is you can take the dirty water and filter it. What the devil meant for evil, God can flip it for good, right? But you have to be aware of what happened at that point where the wave function that you had collapsed didn't work, and there's consequences. But you have to be aware of those consequences, take responsibility yourself. And so when you reach out there to the new wave function, know that you still have these other things that happen that you have to deal with, but you can still reach out there and grab hold of a new wave function. It's not that you wanted to, but it's still out there. But there's stuff weighing you down from all these other possibilities. It's unlimited always, but you've got to figure out how to navigate through it. So you're going through life and you're learning how to navigate life, right? You collapsed the wave function and you thought you had it on track, but then you crashed and burned, and so everything crashed. The wave function didn't give you what you wanted, that you collapsed. You made wrong choices, but then you learn from it. There's consequences. Yeah, there's problems and there's stuff you got to deal with, court stuff, kids, alimony. But there's still unlimited possibilities in another wave function. Even though you have some stuff hindering you, but you can't live in the past, and you know that there's a way to use your situation and it be turned for good. That's my point. I had this conversation with Uber, not this exact conversation, but something similar to this, because I was telling him, I said, when I went through this, I did this, and I actually turned it into good, and it actually became a blessing instead of a curse. Yeah, but you got to let the past go. You can't live in the past. You can't live in regret. You can't live in what could have been, what should have been. You got to let it go, because you can actually use a situation and open up more doors than you would have figured out otherwise. But you got to get your heart right. You got to do the repentance and look at your heart and say, why did I? There's no reason to be a legalist. You can't live in the past. You can't live under guilt, shame, condemnation. Everybody makes a mistake. Now you look at Moses. So he smote the rock twice, and he destroyed the type and shadow of Jesus being smote once. So he couldn't enter into the promised land. So when he smote the rock twice, he couldn't enter into the promised land, but he could see it afar off. But he could enjoy all the possibilities and knowing, just looking ahead, saying, oh yeah, it's going to be nice over there. He could help other people prepare. He could enjoy other things. He might not have entered into the promised land, but he could have enjoyed other things on this side. He could help other people when they get there. You know what I'm saying? You could become a mentor. You could become whatever you want to do. But the promised land might not be attainable once you make all these other wave function mistakes. And sometimes it's not your fault. Sometimes it's just life. Sometimes it's other people. Sometimes somebody. It could be if let's say you got yoked up with a narcissist and the wave function collapsed and they tried to ruin your life, because that's what they do. They try to ruin you, ruin your life, make up stuff, try to get all the people against you or whatever. Can you turn that for good? Yeah. Can you see how while you're in it? Probably not. Does the fog eventually clear? Yeah. How does the fog clear? You start over. You start fresh. When you get knocked down to your foundation, that's when God can work on you. God can work on you when you come to the end of yourself. That's the secret, people. Death, resurrection. Death, resurrection. Yes, there's consequences that carry over to the next day or the next year or whatever. But you can regenerate, renew your inner man, your inner mind, and create new wave functions from the trouble. Create new wave function possibilities from the mistakes. You can reach out and create unlimited possibilities, even though there's offspring mistakes that you made. And I'm not calling children off mistakes. I'm just saying there's offspring consequences to your choices. The offspring, because it's like a river flow. The wave is like a river flow. So it's a spring. Unlimited possibilities. But there's consequences. There's a spring. There's an offspring, right? So there's the river flowing, and there's an offspring off of that wave function that you collapsed. I don't know if this makes sense to anybody, but it makes sense to me. And because I've lived it. I've lived it. When you think it's the end, it can be the beginning. Yeah, there's some pain. There's some, let's say I cut my finger. All right, so I cut my finger. There might still be a cut where I cut my finger. There might be a line there where I cut my finger. But it heals. There's still a memory. It's not who you are anymore, but it's still a little, and it fades over time, you know. So shifting your identity. See, the wave function that you collapse, you kind of identify with that. That fell apart. So you reach out there to the wave function, grab a new thing, and you learn from the mistakes, and you start over, and you do something different. That's how you do it. If it makes sense to somebody, good. If it doesn't, sorry. Every decision is collapsing a wave function. If you make a decision to go get dark chocolate and eat a tad bit each day, you're collapsing the wave function of health. If you make a decision not to associate with unhealthy people, conversations, whatever, you're making a decision for health. If you collapse the wave function not to yoke up with the goats, you're making a decision for peace. And sometimes you have to collapse the wave function for a series or a sequence of time, of cycles, before it sets in. Because that old wave function keeps trying to come back like a memory, like a cut. But eventually you forget. You think about that cut for 2 or 3 days, maybe a week, and then eventually you forget about the cut because you've got a new vision, a new purpose, a new goal, or whatever, or a new cut.